All right, welcome everybody. So this is the um sorry, second.
Oregon coast?
Okay, great. So you can see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the webinar on practical uses of AI and automation for operations, compliance, and client service in financial services. And we're really excited to present this today. And show you some use cases we've seen from real world projects we've done in the field related to this subject. And so I know AI is obviously a hot topic, and it's something that a lot of people are thinking about. And so we're really excited to go into this detail. So a little bit about our speakers. Sure you all know David. We've got David, who's the CEO and CMO of Unipen, who will be co-presenting with me. And then we've got me, Rock Vitale, the founder and CEO of Easie. We'll talk a little bit about our companies and what we do as a refresher, and then we'll dive into the subject.
So I know a lot of the folks on here have interacted with Unipen, either clients or prospects, but we've been around for over 30 years. And I think one of the driving forces today is that over the 30 years, we've seen very similar and consistent needs across compliance, client service, and ops. Compliance, they're always struggling to keep up with data and information. And that those mountains of data have grown over the years. And client service is all about personalization and attentiveness. And operations all about streamlining and efficiency. So Unipen essentially reaches out to internal and external data sources, aggregates data in a data warehouse, and then sends that data out to CRMs, trading systems, client reporting systems, portfolio management systems, and interfaces, executive oversight. So it really is about sending content and context-sensitive data to each user so that they know how to do their job and can do it much easier and faster. And so that's a consistent theme. And with AI, we just have newer tools and expanded functionality, and we'll go through that today.
Awesome. Thanks, David. And then Easie is my company, and our firm has been working in the field of automation and AI implementation since 2018. So our firm has been involved in AI, natural language processing, computer vision, and multimodal data processing since before ChatGPT existed. And we've got experience with implementation for complex use cases, even outside of large language models. And one of the things we'll talk about is that in some cases, large language models aren't necessarily the best or most cost-effective solution. But we've seen quite a lot. We've done over 600 projects in about 40 different industries across both AI and automation. And to David's point, I think choosing the right tool for the right job is critically important. You see kind of a lot of the same types of problems faced across different industries, and you encounter situations where the tools might be slightly different, but this need to have sort of automated, consistent results, sending data that's context sensitive to different locations, and having everything be integrated to talk to each other is often the requirement. And so in some cases, AI is helpful. In some cases, just traditional automation and integrations are helpful. And in some cases, you have the two working together. And so it's been really interesting kind of seeing this wave of AI interest in the past couple of years as things have kind of developed. But that's what we do. And, helping with the implementation of technology, specifically in this sort of focus area, has been, a big part of our work. And so with that, and here's some of our clients that we've worked with. But with that, we want to go a little bit into the goals of this session. So we know a lot of the attendees here are in the sort of financial services space, but some may also be in the nonprofit sector. But our mission for this webinar is really to help financial services firms work smarter through AI and automation solutions that can help minimize the amount of manual work that's being done while simultaneously help you focus on the highest impact work, where you can focus your resources on things that are strategically valuable to your organization. So minimizing kind of manual activity and helping sort of make repetitive work streamlined as much as possible. And our vision, again, at the end of the day, is that you're spending less time on repetitive tasks and more time on client relationships and growing your business. And so practically what that means in today's session is we're going to be sharing some actual practical AI examples from projects that we've done related to financial services, and then also give you a framework for identifying automation opportunities across your business. And so this is meant to be interactive in the sense that we really don't want this to be like a death by PowerPoint situation. But that being said, we will be kind of presenting different slides, et cetera. But as we're doing this, if somebody has a question or if they want to share an anecdote or a pain point or anything kind of along those lines, definitely feel free to do that in the Q&A, and we can address that as it comes up. So, David, anything you want to add about the goals?
I just think that overall, AI is essentially doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes, and that people are still the front and center central component of everything that happens in financial services and in other industries. So I think it just makes people more efficient, faster, and higher quality service. I think that's really the goal here.
That's a really good point. One of the things that we'll touch on when we're doing this is just to say that oftentimes when we're thinking about AI and we're thinking about automation, there's this sort of sentiment of like, oh, it's going to automate 100% of tasks, or like a process is going to be completely automated. And oftentimes what you see is that it's not 100% automated. You have a human in the loop a lot of the time, or you have people that are involved in either an approval step or at some sort of critical sort of phase gate within the process. And so sort of a misconception, but you'll find with a lot of these high impact use cases with AI, you do have some element of human in the loop, where again, if it's helping you do a task faster, if you're going from 20 clicks down to 5 clicks, that's still a 75% reduction in clicks. And so that's how we're thinking about these things. And that's how we encourage you to think about it as well. And so more to say there for sure. So we'll just real quick focus on this slide. I think a lot of us, have kind of a sort of intuitive understanding of what AI is, but it's worth mentioning, what AI is versus what it's not. AI really, at the end of the day, whether you're talking about sort of a more focused machine learning model or like a ChatGPT, large language model type of thing, it's a prediction system that's trained on a large volume of data. It takes data and it understands the statistical relationships with it. And then it's able to make predictions in a way that is highly accurate based on sort of the formulas that are acting as inputs on the actual process. Like at the end of the day, it really is a complex formula where it's taking data, it's conducting linear algebra across a large range of parallel vectors, and it's predicting the next result. And a lot of us have seen this in the text realm, but you can do this on different types of media. You can do it on audio, you can do it on text, you can do it on images, you can do it on videos, and you can even do it on other types of media. It's all just a function of training and setting up the algorithm to work in that specific modality. And so with that being said, modern AI systems are often capable of processing multiple different types of media, so files, documents, images, et cetera. It's quite interesting. And in some business cases, you can even train your own models to do this, built on kind of like the foundation of other open source models. But the long and short of it is it's able to complete relatively simple tasks with limited supervision. Really useful for automation, especially for unstructured data or data requiring interpretation, et cetera. Critically, though, it's also important to understand what AI is not. One thing that's really important to understand that I think is obvious, but I think sometimes is sort of lost in translation a little bit, is AI is not sentient or conscious or aware in any capacity of what it is or what it's doing. Even like a ChatGPT, it has to be told that it's ChatGPT every single time. There's what's called a system prompt, which isn't visible to the users, but it has to be kind of told, even what it is in order to respond correctly. And so it's super interesting in the sense of like people are worried like, oh, it's going to gain sentience, or it's going to become a situation where it takes over the world, or it becomes active in some way that we like lose control of it. And I think it's important to understand where we are kind of with this technology. That's not like it's just going to wake up one day and uh, you know, start having like emotions or become like a digital human. That being said, AI is also generally without like a deep amount of QA. It's not typically able to handle super complex tasks unsupervised. So unless you have like a really complex system that you've designed with a lot of controls, it's sort of not considered cutting edge right now to be able to just, again, have it handle something end to end without some element of human in the loop or supervision. And so that being said, especially for high consequence decisions, we're talking about the finance space in this capacity. It's really not a replacement for humans in final decision making. It can help you compile resources to get to a final decision, but and you see this in the regulatory landscape around AI as well. Like you really, want to be careful if you're using it for actual yes or no decisions. And that being said, too, depending on how you configure it, you're more or less likely to experience what are called hallucinations, which we're all probably somewhat familiar with, where an AI system is confidently incorrect about something. And with some AI models, you're able to see like what degree of confidence it is in a kind of numerical sense. But AI can hallucinate sometimes. So critically, designing quality control systems, depending on your use case, is critically important. But that's all just to say too that AI goes beyond just prompting ChatGPT or prompting Gemini or Claude. There's so much more to AI than just chatbots and large language models. But yeah, anything you want to add here, David?
Yeah, I think that if you're going to be using AI in financial services, one thing that you have to be very clear about is transparency. Auditors are going to want audit trails, logs, and explainability for anything that you do. So that has got to be in place.
Critically important too. And this is where, again, we're talking about the combination of traditional automation and AI systems, where you can build this sort of auditability, you can build this sort of paper trail, and you can really recreate what's happened in order to kind of go back and achieve compliance or to do a root cause analysis if necessary. So with that being said, let's talk on a high level about AI use case categories, and then we'll go into some actual real world examples. So broadly, there's kind of these 5 categories that you see with AI and you see with people doing implementation. And for the focus of this webinar, we're going to focus mainly on kind of the central 3 here of answer and assist, sort and scan, and automate admin. But it's helpful to understand. I think we all kind of know intuitively you can use AI for creating content. You see people writing blog posts, you see people creating social media content, you see in some cases people creating images, etc. That one I think is kind of more intuitively understandable. And so we won't be focusing as much on that because it's kind of obvious. That being said, there's a difference between using AI to write a blog post or to write, like an email or something, versus having it write one in a way that's actually in your brand voice or that's quality or that omits some of the kind of AI tells, like using a long dash or certain types of phrasing. Really interesting if you look at kind of the word analysis of congressional speeches or research papers in the academic sphere, and you see certain phrases popping up dramatically that coincide with the release of ChatGPT. So it's kind of interesting. Long story short, creating content, I think we're all kind of familiar with that, so we're not going to focus as much on that. Same thing on the use case on the right side, learn and decide. Really interesting to help you kind of zoom in on a topic, help you understand something that is complicated. You can upload a document to say like a ChatGPT, and you can say like, oh, okay, like tell me more about what this is actually saying, etc. You can gain insights and support learning. A lot of really interesting stuff going on in the education sector around this, around tutoring and around kind of differentiated instruction on an individualized basis. Super cool. But also kind of, with what we're seeing on like a business side, these central 3 are kind of the most high impact. And it's funny, the Wharton School actually did a study that found that the most common use case for AI in 2025 is extracting data from receipts for the purpose of expense tracking and accounting. it's kind of interesting because, we think about AI and we think about like, oh, like a chatbot or like an agent that does something and it's very interactive and a person is talking to it. But a lot of the time it's these like less sexy use cases that really lead to the most impact. And so that being said, kind of these three use cases in the center: answer and assist, handling repetitive questions on an internal, external basis; sort and scan, being able to review a large amount of data using natural language, being able to quickly review and sort of filter large amounts of documents or data, et cetera. And then automating repetitive, time-consuming tasks and reducing the number of clicks to get to the end result. David, anything you want to mention here?
I've never met a salesperson that loved doing expenses.
Yeah, no kidding. More to say there for sure. But with that, let's talk real quick too about something that is often overlooked. You see people getting stuck in this sort of pilot purgatory situation where I'm sure we all saw that MIT study that whatever, like 95% of pilot projects like don't make it to production, et cetera. And this is definitely something that is a real phenomenon. And I think oftentimes people are like, we want AI, we're in a wait and see holding pattern, we don't understand AI. Maybe we don't have an AI governance policy. And you see people get stuck in this holding pattern, or you see people getting stuck in this sort of pilot purgatory. So this is all just to say that your unique organization has unique problems, unique operations, and unique pain points. And so what we strongly suggest doing, and this is something that Unipen and Easie can really help you with if necessary, but we suggest conducting an audit of your operations before investing in any new technology or software. And this seems obvious, kind of look at your pain points, figure out what has the highest opportunity for automation. We've created this handy matrix. We all love a nice matrix on a Wednesday, but it's a situation where you look at your different operational requirements. What is your most high impact, high frequency pain point? Is it, again, oh, I'm having to have one of my employees manually enter thousands of receipts every month. We've seen situations where we had a client in the tax compliance sector that they were processing like 10,000 invoices per month to look at tax exposure. And that was a situation where we were able to apply a computer vision model to that. You look at your high frequency, high impact pain points, and that's really what your highest priority items should be to focus on for a pilot project. Almost every time we've had an AI implementation that's turned into something really strong and production facing in a regulated industry, it's always started with a pilot project. You always do one little thing, see if you can get the ball rolling on that, get people's creative juices to start flowing, and then you can move into kind of the more broad implementation. The more you involve your staff too, the better. The more people feel like their voices are being heard in this sort of audit process, it really helps kind of downstream when you're changing processes and you're ripping band-aids off and long established situations in an operational sense are being disrupted, et cetera. But high frequency, high impact, sort of the highest priority. High impact, low frequency, or low impact and high frequency are kind of the next medium priority. And then low frequency, low impact are the lowest priority. Seems kind of obvious, but it's helpful to think about when you're doing an audit, especially if you have a more complex business. And all that being said, sometimes people do get stuck in this sort of low priority state where you're working on something that feels cool, like you just made the coolest chatbot that's ever existed, or you just made something that might be for this really kind of esoteric pain point and it feels cool. But again, a lot of the time it's the more dry kind of boring things that end up being the highest impact we've seen. It's like processing tax returns or, doing some kind of deeply manual process that may not even involve a chat interface. So again, you'll see this theme that chatbots are not actually generally the most useful thing, but chatbots are something that have their place in society and business. And so this is all just to say, this is like a fancy way of saying, and it's this image loading. Is the image going to load? Can you see this? Not sure why it's not loading here on the thing. What are your hair on fire problems? You can see this. See the man with his hair on fire.
Yeah.
It's all just to say, what are your hair on fire problems? And so we've all been this guy on the right-hand side here, and we can all relate to this. But if anybody is feeling compelled to, or if you resonate with this, definitely feel free to drop in the Q&A some examples of hair on fire problems that you might have in your business that you've wondered if you could apply automation to. We've all experienced it, and oftentimes it's stuff that involves deep amounts of manual entry. But this is just a shorthand way of saying these are the highest priority things you should focus on when you're doing an audit to figure out what your pilot project should be.
Just usually not smiling while your hair's on fire.
We've all been this guy. And David, I know, both our firms have done a lot of these types of audits, and I really resonated with what you said before, which is that oftentimes you're seeing the same types of problems across different businesses, but just in a slightly different font. So anything you want to add here?
No, I think let's just move right into the case studies.
Cool.
Oh, there's your
Yeah, sure why that was too. Interesting stuff. Okay, so use case example 1. So we have to acknowledge this because again, this is definitely part of it. Chatbots. And so one of the things that I'm sure we've all kind of seen, it's low-hanging fruit, but you can use large language models to have a chatbot that can answer questions very accurately about your specific business. And you can do this on an external basis on your website, or if you have a portal that a user can authenticate on. But you can also do this on an internal basis. Sometimes it's a separate website where it's a chat interface, but then other times it's a user in Slack, or it's an email address that you can send to, or it's something you can text. It's not always just, hey, let me sign into a chatbot somewhere and do this. It can really be like, oh, on Slack or on Microsoft Teams. It can be like a teammate kind of that you can talk to. So really helpful for new employee onboarding, really helpful also for answering a huge amount of customer request questions. We found that you can reduce the volume of customer requests by about 75% for answering these kind of tier 1 questions. You can also set it up though, where it can route you to a tier 2 type of support. So one of the things that's critical to understand about this is that there's a level of implementation that's involved here where you can't just set up like an OpenAI chatbot to answer questions without training it in a way that it can understand your brand voice, your company specific use cases. So there's things you can do where you can either do fine tuning, or you can do what's called retrieval augmented generation. Not going to go into a huge amount of detail about that, but there's ways to dynamically, based on the question being asked, insert specific context that you've provided so that the AI model can answer questions very accurately according to your brand voice. Really, with large language models, there's only kind of 2 ways that it can learn more outside of kind of what it is out of the box. It's either fine tuning, which is sort of less popular for a chatbot, or there's this dynamically inserting data using retrieval augmented generation and a vector database. Super interesting stuff. Not going to go too much into the details on that, but you can get these chatbots to not only answer questions extremely accurately, but also to not answer the question if it doesn't have the answer and route the person to a human. So you can categorize these things. There's a lot of customizability here, but you can set these things up not just to do question and answer, but you can set these things up to schedule appointments, to update things in your database, and to kind of do things that require actual automation on top of it. So you can get into more of like an agent as opposed to a chatbot. Critically, you can have nice detailed analytics around this. You can see what people are saying. You can keep these chat logs, and you can put specific triggers in place to route to a human if certain things are said. So definitely useful, and definitely where you see a lot of kind of startups putting their flag down. But more and more, you see a lot more of this kind of userless technology where you're not actually having to like talk to it or do anything with it. It's almost just built into your process, which we'll talk about next. So one of the things that is really useful in kind of the AI for finance use case is document processing. In the sector, we do process a huge amount of documents. Sometimes it's things like invoices and tax returns, but other times it's sort of onboarding data or large trust documents, or even like a series of documents that we may not even fully know what they are. And so you can take documents from different resources. It could be from a DocuSign, it could be from your email, it could be from Dropbox, it could be scans, it could be all kinds of things. You can take the data You can put it through an AI layer that you fine tune to your specific use case, and then you can push it to other kind of resources. You can push it to your SharePoint, you can push it to Salesforce, you can push it to Informatica or SAP if you're using that. But what's really interesting about this is that oftentimes, again, these AI systems are a layer in your tech stack, and it's not actually where the data is ultimately living. It's sort of this intermediate thing that is transforming and processing the data before it gets to its end result. So super interesting stuff, and definitely a kind of throwback to what the Wharton School found, that processing receipts was the most common use case in a business context. So zooming in a little further on this, and again, if anybody resonates with this, feel free to share an anecdote. But investment account onboarding automation is sort of an obvious one, where in some of these use cases, you have very sort of standardized forms, but in other cases, you have forms where the format might vary dramatically. But you can use these AI systems for your customer documents, W-8 documents, et cetera. And what you can do when you extract the data is you can apply business rules to either flag incomplete items or non-compliant entries. You can sort of look for things that are like known to be problems, and you can trigger different workflows based on that. You can have these systems integrated with your CRM or other compliance tools to trigger approval workflows or automate population of different data points within client records, et cetera. You can also use these things for detecting whether a signature is present. You can use it for understanding multilingual input, so translation. We just did a project recently where we had to do like large amount of translation, over 85,000 different snippets of information from Japanese to English, which was really interesting. But then also you can use these computer vision tools to verify things like a driver's license. And again, you're not always using large language models for this. For the driver's license thing, for example, there's open source models that you can configure in a secure way to extract the data from a driver's license. And again, when we're talking about all of this, the implication of security being top of mind, making sure that you're still applying best practices of automation, making sure that you're configuring these different systems correctly so that your data is not being used for training these AI models, which you can configure if you're using, say, like an OpenAI, et cetera. Security obviously is implied as top of mind when we're doing this. David, anything you want to mention about onboarding automation?
Yeah, we've done some very, very complex onboarding automation where the steps could be like 37 different steps and touch almost everybody across the firm. And a lot of these steps have to be done serially. So one has to be done before the other or it can't move forward. And then at some point it branches out where there's 5 processes that can be done in parallel that can all be done by different people. And then the next step can't happen until all 5 of those are completed. And so notifications and coordination of all of that is a huge effort, but it's streamlined amazingly if you can automate that process. So we've done that in the past. And then just one comment about the different types of forms, the variations in forms. We see that a lot with institutional consultants, that they send in their request forms and they're always in a different format. It drives people mad and they spend a lot of effort and time on that. And so that's a huge place where you could get some benefit and some operational efficiency.
So true. Like that anecdote that I was telling you, where we had the client that was processing 10,000 invoices a month. It was a situation where every invoice was in a completely different format. And so we had to train a custom computer vision model where it could extract these data fields even when the format varied dramatically. And so it's just a real sort of testament that the tools you select are largely dependent on the use case. And a large language model, I will say, does struggle a little bit when we're talking about stuff like this, especially because one of the things that I'm sure we've all seen with documents is that you can have scanning artifacts, you can have variation in quality. Sometimes it's an image, sometimes there's handwriting on it. And sometimes there's even things like sort of artifacts where there's like a vertical line going through the document. And so, you have to have controls in place for those kind of things. But I will say that with document processing, large language models do struggle like a bit if there's variation. Cool. So then moving into the next use case, kind of in the same vein of document processing, Document intake. So like David was saying, if you have these complex processes for, say, like a financial planner client intake form, you can pull information out of these things, whether it's just the name and address of the person, whether there's like specific dates that you need to be sort of structuring these things around. So we've seen documents that are related to like permits, for example, that have an expiration date on it. And you can trigger things in your database to auto trigger, sending requests for information back to the client, updating things that in your CRM, or in sort of a planning and project management context, say if you're using like an Asana or a Jira or a Microsoft project, you can take these kind of key pieces of information and then use them to act as downstream elements for your workflow. What's cool about this is you're seeing unstructured data be turned into structured data. And so, there's things you can do with document processing where if it's a PDF and it's filled out in a way that is not like a scan, like there's things you can do where you don't even need AI and you can just pull the data out of the PDF, but it's very unreliable for large scale document processing because there's ways you can flatten the file so that you can't access that data. And then there's also, oftentimes the case where sometimes the data is scanned and all of that is lost. So being able to apply computer vision to documents is definitely the best practice, where it doesn't matter if it's accessible programmatically and you can just act based on the pixels in the image itself. Super interesting sort of subset of computer vision, but fascinating nonetheless.
For many years, we've taken those input documents and automatically set up the account in the CRM, stored the documents, notified compliance that the documents were all there, actually reached into the portfolio accounting system and set up the new accounts in there, and then notify whoever the portfolio managers, the traders, when the accounts are funded, all the documentation is there, and the accounts are ready to trade. So it really keeps people from fumbling and from missing steps, for sure.
Critically, that's a great point. So then this is one that we've seen quite a lot of sort of traction in. That's sort of a hot space for sure. But extracting data from contracts is another one that we've seen be super useful, where oftentimes you've just got these sort of repetitive yet simultaneously low-hanging fruit use cases where, it's funny, like you'll see things like, oh, we get these contracts and we need to enter the date, the effective date, and the address of the client into SharePoint, for example. Just little things like that. Like it doesn't always have to be some complicated use case, but extracting data from contracts, extracting terms, understanding if things aren't in the contract, and looking for sort of deviations in what you're expecting, but then also critically looking for specific terms that you might need to extract and transform to put into your sort of downstream processes. This is something we've seen that's pretty hot topic, and relatively straightforward to set up if you know what you're doing. There's things where, if you're using a large language model, but even if you're using like a single use computer vision model, more narrow use case, there's different kinds of knobs and sort of settings that you can configure that help you have a much more accurate result. Oftentimes what you get out of the box is not necessarily configured for this type of thing. It's configured more for like a chat use case, especially with large language models. So understanding some of these kind of parameters and whether you should use fine tuning, or whether you should kind of apply a training layer on top of it, is important based on, again, the amount of variation, the length of the contract, and the sort of elements around what specifically you're looking for. It's sort of the use case very much dictates what the actual solution will be. That being said, too, one thing that's sort of subtle but helpful to understand is sometimes you get these large packets of documents. Maybe it's a tax return, maybe it's something else, but sometimes you get these large packets of documents. Maybe it's like a 75-page PDF, but each page is like its own discrete thing where like it's not necessarily like a continuation of something. With a contract, it often is the case where the pages are all very dependent on each other. But with a multi-page situation, you also have the case where a lot of the pages might be irrelevant to what you're looking for. And so in some cases, you want to do a workflow where you go through each page, you classify whether the page is relevant and what the page is saying. And only then, if it's relevant, do you apply a deeper level of understanding to it. And so we've seen that with kind of different types of tax documents and sort of complex documents. And so it's just to say that you really got to think about your use case. And this is where that audit comes into play. All right, so then kind of the next use case that really is interesting. It's relevant. It's related to the kind of internal and external chatbots, but with like a little bit of a twist. So we've all seen interfaces like this, but you can use AI systems that are fine-tuned to your use case to actually chat with a document. So you have a document pulled up, and in this case, this is an RFP that was pulled up that was 61 pages, but you can use that to then, you can use these systems to then ask questions about the document. So oftentimes we see like, oh, I've got a 300-page document. I need to understand specific items of it. I need to ask critical questions. You can use that, a system like this to actually have a one-on-one conversation about a large document or even a series of documents. What's cool about this is that you can have it set up to return citations where it's saying like on this page, this is where it says it, like right here. You can even have it so bounding boxes can go around the specific thing that we're talking about. I'm not going to go too much into the technical detail, but when you're doing this kind of thing, you really need to have system set up to do what's called chunking, where the documents sort of split up in a logical way. And the way to do that sort of varies between document types. But really cool because it can really help sort of speed up research time. It can help reduce the amount of time you're spending on like specific tasks related to these like large documents. What's also interesting about this is you could set it up kind of similarly to what we talked about in these last use cases, but you can set it up so that certain questions about the document get answered automatically, depending on sort of what your workflow looks like. And using this retrieval augmented generation system where you're using this in combination with a vector database dramatically improves kind of the reliability of the answers. And you can set it up again critically using what are called system instructions so that if it doesn't have the answer, like it definitely will not give you something that is made up. So really, really good for this sort of document Q&A. Critically, if you do it this way, you'll get much more reliable answers than if you just use like a ChatGPT or a Gemini out of the box. So that's helpful to understand. If you upload a 2-page document to ChatGPT, then it's not terrible. But if you upload like a 60-page document to ChatGPT, it's going to struggle a little bit, especially for kind of the pages in between these sort of long context situations. And so a lot to be said. There's a blog post on our website about retrieval augmented generation that goes into more detail about this, but chatting with documents is definitely quite an interesting example. We've seen this be sort of a hot topic with answering questions about contracts, RFPs, legislation, et cetera. And David, anything you want to add about this on the finance side?
I think this just spans across the entire investment management firm or asset management firm. I mean, it's beneficial for compliance, for portfolio managers, for client service, for operations. It really is a beneficial tool across the board. Very important, very key.
Cool. So then this next one I think is pretty broad. It's, I'm sure we can think about like in the finance context, how this can be relevant. And I kind of talked about this a little bit, but you can use AI systems to classify information according to specific criteria that you set. So you can see how in these examples, this is kind of not necessarily in the finance industry, but you can see like on the left-hand side, we're using it for moderation. So if you have a system that you get like external comments or you get, input from users that you have to classify if it's sort of content that is not allowed according to your terms. So you can see in this case, you flag content according to different kind of moderation use cases. You'd see on the right-hand side, you've got a video feed where you're trying to detect if certain objects are in an image. And then on the bottom there, you're trying to detect on a manufacturing line if there's defects in the component. So you can see this, the one on the left has a bent pin, the one on the right has non-bent pins, and so it passes inspection. But for large amounts of data, you can classify it into different categories to say, like, if it's this category, put it into this downstream workflow. And if it's this moderated category, maybe it's flagged for some reason, then maybe we push it in a different direction. So this is super useful for kind of a lot of different use cases, but having a classification step built in before you do extraction or before you do further kind of automated processes on the data can really help with quality control and accuracy, where, sometimes we've seen use cases where, a 99% accuracy rate isn't good enough. You need 99.9%. And to squeeze that little bit of juice out, having a classification step can be extremely helpful. David, anything you want to add here?
Nope.
Cool. So then the next thing we want to talk about that is less so AI related and more so related to just kind of pure automation. I'm sure we've all seen interfaces like this. Is this the same way that QuickBooks looks? This is the same way that all kinds of software looks, where you have custom portals and interfaces that do different types of functions for your specific business use case. So I'm sure we've seen, expensive third-party software that maybe does like 80% of what you want it to do. And they're asking you to change your process to fit whatever their use case is. And to kind of change what you're doing so that you can use their software. That's often less useful than if you have a custom built portal or interface that maybe is integrated with your systems. Maybe Salesforce is underneath this, or maybe NetSuite is underneath this, or SharePoint. But having an interface that does kind of more custom functions and maybe has some AI features that don't come out of the box with these third-party tools, or maybe you're using spreadsheets for a lot of stuff. Maybe you want more of an audit log in a centralized place. Maybe you have 10 different apps that might be integrated, they might not, but they're not all being kind of controlled in a single location. So having a custom portal can be really helpful for kind of putting it all together. And you don't necessarily need to build this completely from scratch. There's different sort of software modules you can use. We have a system that we often implement for people for stuff like this, but having custom portal or interface, or even like a mobile app, can be super useful for kind of tying it all together and really making it do exactly what you want, instead of having to pay some huge amount of money for a third-party tool that doesn't even do what you're trying to get it to do. But you can see, I mean, none of this is reinventing the wheel, but you have like a calendar, a table, maps, document, view, tables, etc. Custom portals, enough said. So in closing, different things AI can help finance teams do. You're eliminating data entry, you're reducing data entry time dramatically and achieving auditability and compliance. You're processing documents on like a large scale way. You're indexing documents for later querying. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but you can actually set up AI systems so that, say you have a large number of documents and you might want to search based on a concept. You might want to say like, give me all of my documents, that are in 2024, for example. You might want to just do a natural language query like that. You can query documents using natural language in a way that's really interesting. We had a client that wanted to query a large amount of legislation for a concept like environmental justice. And instead of having to use keywords, you can use these sort of indexing systems to query according to natural language. You'll see this a lot in the future. This is definitely, you're going to be able to talk to Google Maps in a much more natural language way to kind of get answers like this. But if you have a large amount of data or documents that you need to query, putting something where you can do a natural language search is extremely powerful and extremely interesting, especially when you just can't remember what that keyword is, or you're just not getting the result that you want. And again, you can do it for kind of filtering things too, like give me all documents from 2024, for example, or give me the past 10 transactions, for example. And then, on top of that, custom business rules, being able to apply conditional rules based on different types of expiration dates or specific values, etc. Trigger-based actions based on what the data looks like after it's extracted. And then, if it makes sense, having it viewable in an interface. This is all just to say that sometimes you're using AI, sometimes you're using traditional automation. But super interesting kind of process automation that can be achieved. But based on your business use case, after you do an audit, you might find that there's a very concentrated amount of things that are, good candidates for this. In other cases, you might find, hey, there's quite a lot that we could apply this to. Some of the biggest companies are run by less than 100 people because of stuff like this. And then finally, and we've kind of only lightly touched on this, but you can actually use these tools to automatically do things that require using websites or apps. So you can create bots that actually interact with websites, databases, submit forms on websites. You're starting to see this a little bit with some of the out-of-the-box models like ChatGPT having its agent mode, but you can do robotic process automation where it's actually interacting with websites and whatnot in real time. So it might be that you can't integrate with something. It might be that, in some client use cases we've seen, you have like a government website that hasn't been updated since the 90s that you have to interact with. It definitely doesn't have any integration capability. And so it's sort of a final little tool in your toolbox that can be really useful. And then, that being said, what's the end result? You can reduce manual entry and process time by up to 99%. David, anything you want to add before we go into Q&A?
I think that historically, compliance officers have always fought with the problem of mountains of data and not enough people and time to pour through it and catch everything and prioritize everything. So, we've seen AI in biology and mapping genomes and testing drugs at rapid speed and really making a big impact. And I think similar, compliance officers just have too much to do and too little time and effort to do it. And this is going to really make a big difference in the compliance arena, finding issues much sooner, maybe even heading off compliance errors and issues. Also, client service, you can track, characteristics of your clients and look for certain behaviors or whatnot to trigger an advisor to give them a call, because with the algorithms that you could put in place, you could figure out which clients may be at risk for leaving or moving their assets. Also, tracking anti-money laundering and KYC issues. So there's a lot to this, and there's a lot of really good real-life applications for it that can really change the way you do business and the impression that you give to your clients with the personalization that comes along with all that as well.
Well said. Okay, so with that, I think we'll dive into Q&A. So again, if anybody wants to share an anecdote or if anybody has a specific question, feel free to drop it in the Q&A box and we can address it.
One question is about surrounding privacy, and you're exposing all of these confidential documents and information to AI. Maybe we should talk a little bit about the privacy of that and protecting that information so that you keep that information confidential.
Yeah, 100%. I think, like I said earlier, privacy, security, and confidentiality is #1 priority. It's one of those things where, setting something up incorrectly can have catastrophic results. And it's not just a matter of how you're passing things to the AI. It's also what your actual onboarding looks like. Do you have password rotation mechanisms happening? Do you have two-factor authentication set up? Do you have people trained to not click links on emails? Do you have email security systems set up so that it can flag, likely spam? All of those kind of cybersecurity concerns, even outside of AI, can't be forgotten in this case, because at the end of the day, AI is just another type of software system that you're setting up that still needs to follow the same kind of best practices, including principle of least access and keeping track of who's accessing what, having audit logs in place, and in a cloud-based system having something like AWS CloudTrail in place to really have that deep auditability. We're talking about regulated industries and compliance, and access controls are obviously critically important. The other thing is that different AI systems do have different terms in place. So Gemini is a little more like loose in terms of the fact that they may train on some of your data, that in certain high priority use cases, you can have a contract with them where they won't do that. OpenAI by default generally doesn't train on your data, but it's a setting that you need to double check when you are configuring it. But the actual systems, if you have them configured correctly, will not use your data for training. It's the same thing as if you're interacting with like a Salesforce, or if you're interacting with a QuickBooks. Your confidential data is in there, but it's secured in an encrypted way from access from other users, et cetera. But I think oftentimes when we're talking about data being compromised, you see it much more from kind of misconfigured systems or cybersecurity gaps, as opposed to the AI system itself, like seeing your data and then using it and it leaking in some capacity. I think the risk is much more on the side of kind of traditional cybersecurity, especially because it's sort of number one concern with different businesses if they're using a large language model. The only other thing I'll say too is that in some really high sort of security use cases, you find people are using either an open source large language model, which exists, pretty broadly, but then, or using, again, these sort of single use, like very focused AI models that the data is just existing within their sort of cloud environment, and the actual AI model is hosted in their cloud environment, as opposed to, existing as like what's called an API, where you're interacting with a third-party system and the data is going to a third party temporarily.
Rock, on that subject, our offerings for IT and cybersecurity and financial services really leverages hard on AI, especially protecting endpoints. When our cybersecurity AI sees a certain behavior at our client sites, it actually goes out and looks for similar behaviors across the globe and sees if it's been triggering issues and how people are solving those issues, and then brings that back to the team so that they know immediately that this has happened before, and here's what it's benign or it's malevolent, and that can happen practically in real time. So the cybersecurity battle of good versus evil is a really interesting area, and it's going to get more exciting, unfortunately, as we move forward in time.
Yeah, exciting is definitely a good way to put it. It's interesting. We definitely are still early in the adoption curve, from my perspective, and so we may see a lot of interesting developments. We may see man-made horrors beyond our comprehension. But I think it's a situation where it's deep opportunity, and I think it's something that we've seen have huge impact in the projects that we've done. And so, with the idea in mind that you got to keep security at the top of mind, like there really is a lot of opportunity here. So great question. Any other questions from the audience that
There's
anyone
one other about data quality, and essentially, like anything else, any other system, it's garbage in, garbage out, as we all know. And so there are things that we've been doing for many years with regard to importing data from internal and external sources and moderating and monitoring that data with exception reporting and whatnot. But it can be a slow process. AI has definitely made a huge impact on that kind of cleanliness of data, screening it, looking for gaps, just looking for erroneous data, inconsistent data across your key platforms and data sources. So, it's still the same problem, but the new tools are making it more efficient and faster to capture and prevent that data from going in and mucking up your systems and how you do business.
Yeah, 100%. Garbage in, garbage out, no question. Well said.
That's it. Unless anybody else has any other questions. No? All right. Well, then, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Hope you learned something. And as we said earlier, even though we're focused on financial services, that does apply to, a lot of this applies to any kind of business or nonprofit. So if you have any questions, give us a call and let us know if we can help. Thanks, Rock, for giving us all that detailed information and expertise. Appreciate that.
Of course, and thank you, David, for co-hosting with me.
All right. Well, we'll sign off there. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.